Welcome to the Leadership Puzzle. I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci, co-founder of Evolve HR Solution. In this project, we're taking a journey to uncover the mysteries of leadership with some of the world's most accomplished leaders. In each episode, we discover the distinct insight from each of these great leaders, enabling us to refine our leadership skills and become more effective leaders. Piece by piece, together, we will assemble the leadership puzzle. After 30 years in leadership, there's one thing that I've learned. Leadership is hard. The demands on individuals have peaked over the last few years, so knowing how to be your true, authentic self while leading in today's environment, it's absolutely critical. In this episode, we're talking about the leadership puzzle piece of authenticity. Our guest today is Bill Chinn, the former SVP of Store Operations for GameStop, and is now the CEO of the DEC Network, a Dallas-Fort Worth-based nonprofit that supports the startup community. He has accomplished something that many leaders long for, and that is to make the jump from the corporate world into the nonprofit world. We're going to explore that as well as his leadership journey. As always, our podcast is sponsored by Evolve HR Solutions, a global HR recruiting, consulting, and software company that is dedicated to meeting all of your HR needs. So you're in for a great interview. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out and coming on the Leadership Puzzle.
Oh, pleasure to be here, Jeff.
All right. You know, I was really excited that you joined the Leadership Puzzle, and I was thinking about it back on when we first met. Do you remember that day?
Oh, I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me your side of the story.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are two sides. Well, I was a big brothers and big sisters, and HR was tough. It's always tough, and it's sort of an art and a science at the same time. And frankly, we weren't doing it that well. So we'd reached out to some professional volunteer organization that sort of promised that they would hook you up with executives, the field that you were having concerns with. And we didn't really get a lot of bites. And the truth of it is, you're really looking for someone who's currently in the C-suite. You can find a lot of folks who are really well-meaning and it can be useful, who are retired or sort of in a job search. But what's really meaningful is someone who's got all the resources, who's currently in it. I mean, that's invaluable to us. And so what happened was we weren't getting a lot of bites. And then someone walked into a meeting and they said, we got this C-suite guy from Sally Beauty, and he called. And I'm saying, oh my God, we got to call back right away. So we were just excited you called. And then I called you back and I'm like, well, he's not going to pick up. I mean, and you picked up and we had a great conversation, but we just felt so lucky because, I mean, the folks that are the most useful to our nonprofits are the ones who are super busy, right? And so it's that tension. And so to find someone who was in a C-suite practicing, had all the resources at their fingertips, it was just incredible, lucky. And then I think it was a particular match because I think, you'd really been thoughtful who you reached out to and you really had a heart for the cause. So we couldn't feel more blessed that day. It was an exciting moment for us.
I remember having the conversation and you were like, oh, well, let's meet in person. And you recommended a place, just a few minutes. I mean, we don't live, but 10 minutes from each other. And I totally forgot to look at my phone and what meetings I had that morning. And I think I had, just gotten out of the shower, gotten dressed, whatever. And you called and said, are we still meeting? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. I'll be right there. I'm sorry, and I really thank you for giving me a little bit of grace for being late because I would not have wanted to miss out on this friendship or being able to partner with you and some of the great things that you're doing. So,
okay, I don't think you did tell me that story, but yes, I think I remember that now.
Well, great. Well, you have an amazing career so far, and so if I'd like to spend a few minutes on your journey, tell us a little bit about your time at GameStop, but then I think the listeners are going to be really interested on that tremendous leap that you went from the corporate world to the nonprofit world. So tell us that story.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds such a long time ago. I started with GameStop in 1989, And that was such a long time ago. That it was an entrepreneurial company. It started in Dallas, right down the street from us. North Park Mall was the first GameStop store. It wasn't called GameStop at that point. It was called Babbage's. But that's what it evolved into. So I loved it. I mean, I'm right out of college, working for an entrepreneurial company, so busy growing. Great environment for me, and just stayed there for 20 years. So what was really fascinating is day one was very entrepreneurial, and at the end of that 20 years, in the last 8 years, I spent as head of stores, and the growth was just incredible. So day one was entrepreneurial, and my last day I was working for a Fortune 300 company, and to watch a company evolve.
Hmm.
I mean, even as head of stores, when I started as head of stores, um, there was 650 stores, if I remember
Wow.
correctly, and when I left, there were like 4,500, and so the growth was staggering.
Yeah.
And they were such great guys. I mean, the founders were just amazing. So they let you do a lot of what you wanted to do, and I was always wanted to be a nonprofit,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, I just couldn't afford it, right? And so, my idea was, so let me make some money and then I'll go in a nonprofit. But, someone at some point had said, yeah, the nonprofit people are going to stare at you. I mean, you're going to tell them how great you are. And they're like, I mean, we don't believe that your heart's in this. We don't see nonprofit work in your resume. So I went to the GameStop founders and said, hey, can I be like the nonprofit guy at GameStop? And they said, great. And they were very generous and very charitable, but they let me kind of head that up. So, I was on several boards before I left GameStop, and that gave me, a little bit of credibility, and really some of that knowledge I got before making the big jump was instrumental in being able to make the jump.
So you're the SVP of operations, store operations of GameStop. Most professionals would go, "Wow, you're at the top of the game." You just said it's a Fortune 300 company, and do you just go, "Okay, I'm done here," and then jump over and say, "Okay, let's see what is out there," or did you jump right into Big Brothers Big Sisters? Tell us about that transition.
Well, look, I should have stayed at GameStop, right? I mean, I just, that was a great gig for me. I loved everyone there. There was so much credibility. You were the guy that had been there 20 years. I mean, you remember in a growth company, turnover's unbelievable. And there just weren't that many employees. So, I mean, it's not like joining this huge entity where they've got tons of people who've been there decades. I mean, so, I was the guy that they would walk down to my office and say, what were you guys thinking 5 years ago when you created this program? I mean, and I'd be like, well, at that time there was all this going on. And so, you have a tendency, and I definitely did this, to think that your success was just because, I'm really good at this. Right. And I think the answer I learned was, I don't know if it was I was really good at it. I'd been around for a long time, and I brought a lot of value to the organization just because I could tell people the context. And
Sure.
when you leave, the day you leave, all of that 20 years of context is gone. And so, you really are starting over. And the truth of it is, I shouldn't have left. I mean, there was nothing about that job I disliked. I did have a desire to do nonprofit. And I think that, 20 years is a long time to stay anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, for sure.
there's kind of a gravitational pull to do something
I
else.
think it's pretty common where leaders get, I've heard it called halftime, right? I mean, if you think that you've got, from 21 to 65, about halftime is about 20 years in, and they think, oh, I want to go from success, which you clearly had in the corporate world, to something of significance, helping others who could use and benefit from my experience. If you were to tell the listeners what some of the key differences between that corporate environment and nonprofit environment, and what do they need to be thinking about if they are in that space where they're thinking about, yeah, I'd like to do something a little bit different.
That's a great question, Jeff. And I think it's important because, back then I thought, look, I'm going to go jump in a nonprofit, and I'm going to bring, this business knowledge to them. And, that's not the way it works. It's a very different environment. And I'll tell a story. It's probably not that PC, but, because this is HR, I'm going to tell it because it's very topical HR. I jump over to the nonprofit that I'm now going to be working full time, previously on the board. And the head of HR came up to me, and really, this is like week two. I mean, pretty early on. And she says, "Look, Bill, I noticed you do emails over the weekend. We don't want to send the signals to our employees that they have to work over the weekend. So can you do me a favor? Can you reserve your emails? And then when you arrive on Monday morning, could you then release them?" And it's one of those things where, look, I don't. When you go to a new industry, they're not going to change for you. You need to change for them. But then there's a little bit of who you are, and that was one of those moments. I'm like, am I changing and sort of being subsumed in this culture, or is this kind of a principle for me? So and you're making these decisions split second, and I kind of said, look, I get what you're trying to do here, but first of all, I don't want to do that. And there's a couple of reasons. One is I don't think my direct reports are idiots. I think if they get 6 emails every 9 a.m. on Monday, they're going to figure out those are done on the weekend.
Yeah.
And I support what you're trying to do here. I don't think people should work weekends. I mean, that's the goal. Let's get this done, between 9 to 5. But at the end of the day, I got to be who I am. And when I get passionate about something, I'll do some emails over the weekend. I don't expect people to answer on a weekend, but I'm not going to be someone who's completely different. And so I kind of said, as respectful as I could, I'm not going to do that. But I understand why you're making that point. So there's a huge, I mean, it's a gaping gap between the environments of a typical nonprofit and a typical profit. And the trick is to find, and they both have great things. And the trick is to kind of get in there and figure out all the, I love it over here because everyone's so passionate and they really want to help their community. I don't love the pace. The pace bothers me. It's slow. Oh, yeah, Jeff, I used to self-talk. I mean, I literally talk. I was like, Monday morning. Look, GameStop. We're a fun group. I thought. I mean, you walk into a meeting on Monday morning, and people are going to talk about the Cowboys, and there's going to be some banter. But 90 seconds, we're in a business. And I had to, when I first get in a nonprofit, I would lecture myself, Bill, we're going to spend 5 to 10 minutes on everyone's weekend, and then you get to talk about business. And it was so unnatural for me. To be honest with you, I mean, I don't know if I've changed, they've changed me, or I've changed them, or it's a bit of both. But now I'm happy talking 5 minutes about everyone's week. I mean, I'm good with it. But man, it was a tough transition.
Well, you bring up a really important leadership trait is that authenticity of who you are, and I think that was probably really valuable for them to see that, hey, it's this is part of who I am. Now, I have expectations that you're not going to be working on the weekend, but on Sundays, that's what I do. I catch up for the week, and I think that authenticity really plays well in the long term. So I really want to start digging into your leadership puzzle. And you mentioned a little bit that you had to change your leadership style. You're now 8 years into it. And if you look back, what are the stark differences of your leadership style?
Well, you really have to significantly adapt in a new industry. And that was kind of my big thing is I was a little bit arrogant when I came in, and there was way too much of I need to change the way they approach this, and there's not enough of kind of humbly. I mean, you guys have been around. I mean, the first nonprofit, which is a great nonprofit, have been around for 114 years, and it was worth taking the time to figure out why they did things the way they did it. And if I could go back and do it again, I would slow down a little bit and listen to a little more. And sometimes the for-profit folks, and again, as a for-profit folk, there was a little bit of eye rolling. I mean, you guys seem plotting to me. What I mean, let's get to the chase here. And as you move into that nonprofit, you begin to understand why that pace has to slow down a little bit. Why you have to make sure that everyone's keeping pace. Why you have to make sure, because this is about heartstrings. I mean, this is about emotion, and you have to make sure everyone's staying up with what changes you're going to make, because these folks they're in it because they're smart. They could make more money other places, but they choose this lifestyle in this industry because their heart's in it, and you can't leave their heart behind. You can't. There's no, man, can we just do this? And I promise you, it'll all come clear in the future. You'll understand it. You'll still be passionate. I mean, you really got to take the time to say, look, let me tell you where we're headed. This is why this really important cause that you believe in, this is why we need to pivot. And this is going to serve the folks that you really care about much better in the future. And you have to take that time to do that. You have to slow down and make sure everyone's up to speed.
You hit on something. Attracting talent in the nonprofit space a little bit different than attracting talent in the for-profit space. You're not competing on compensation. What do you look for, and how do you find those individuals that aren't motivated by money, that they're motivated by a cause?
Yeah, I think that's job one. Is let's just figure out how you feel about this cause. Certainly for employees, but even you're looking at board members and advisors, and amazing folks like yourself who just volunteer their very valuable time in organizations. Is nonprofits are almost by definition frustrating, and so you've got to find people who believe in the cause, because I can almost guarantee you, as a nonprofit, you're gonna upset them at some point, right? There's a variety of reasons for that, but at the end of the day, if they believe in the cause, they're gonna have patience. Volunteers, as a rule of thumb, I mean, the first sign of gunfire, they're gone. I mean, they're a volunteer. This is not how they feed their family. But if they really believe in the cause, they get through with you some of the tougher times. Some of the, you're going to make mistakes. You're understaffed. Your average employee is 23 years old. You're not going to be so smooth that you don't screw something up. And so, that cause is what keeps their head in the game. Is it? They'll be like, yeah, that didn't really work that well, but I'm still with you because I really believe in these kiddos, or I really believe in this equity issue. I mean, that's a very important part of surrounding
Yeah.
yourself with people who are going to stay.
Once you find that good talent that believes in your cause, how do you retain them? What's your secret sauce to keep them with you as long as possible?
I think that you really have to spend time on development. I mean, you have to be really genuine about what do you want to do in 3 to 5 years, and you hope that that's congruent with what the organization needs. But even if it's not in this environment, you've got to keep working on their development. They have to believe they're learning a lot. They have to believe that you're giving them opportunities to run things that maybe a little bit beyond their experience, that they're not going to find in a different environment. So they have to feel like, I'm making progress here, because, as you said, look, you know, the world in the nonprofits got a lot better when it comes to compensation, but we're way lower than the folks we're competing against in the for-profit world for these really smart people coming out of college. And so you've got to put a lot of extra time in listening and being really intentional about what do you want to do with your career. We're going to help you with that, right? We're not going to be able to, you're not getting a BMW like your suite mate at college just did. But we are going to make sure that you feel like you're building something here.
Ironically, some of those same attributes apply in the corporate world as well. Once that compensation threshold is satisfied, then it really does play into some of the heart and mind kind of activities of how do you engage them and get them to believe in a grander vision than themselves. So that's great that you've figured that differentiation out.
I don't know if we figured out, Jeff. We asked you, and that's what you told us, and it works. So we do it.
Oh, it's interesting that you brought up kind of HR. I've worked with a number of CEOs that have a very low opinion of HR. It's almost a necessary evil of having HR, and they think of the old Dilbert cartoon of the evil HR director. But you don't share that perspective. You have a higher value that you place on HR. Tell us a little bit about where did that come from, and what benefits you see by engaging with some HR professional to better your organization.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm kind of a pragmatist. Turnover kills you, right? And honestly, I've lost some folks that were really valuable in my career. And when I went back and I sort of analyzed it, it was those. It wasn't, man, I got a better offer. I mean, there's some of that, but that's usually just why they sat down with the person that eventually went. That's not why they left. And so, it's really an art. It's not a science. It's not about dollars. It's not about, here's the org chart in 2 years that gets your name. It's about stuff that frustrated them and they let it metastasize, and and you got to have a process which HR gives you to get those concerns out, right? Because we're going to have disagreements, but let's not make sure they fester and turn into something. I mean, and one of the things, and I know you and I have talked about this, is you got to win over the spouse as well. I mean, I've had more really good folks I really didn't want to lose, leave me because basically their spouse is like, you got to go. That place is, they don't value you. You can do better. I mean, you really got to win the hearts and minds. And that to me is kind of an HR function. And HR is the folks that give you those processes to do that in a more formal way and make sure you're disciplined to that. And if you're not disciplined to that, we're moving so fast. I mean, we're buzzing along and we're full of ideas and and if you don't have a good HR side of your organization to just make sure that you're touching in with people and hey, what can we do better? How do we screw this up? What's sticking in your craw? Let's talk about that. If you don't have that process, and if you don't have a process to have fun with your folks and go play pickleball with them and show them what a terrible athlete you are, and just those human moments, good folks are going to leave you. And man, when you lose a rock star, that's about the most painful thing in business.
There's studies that have been done on that top talent, that rock star, and there's one study that says that rock star could produce 8 times more than your average employee. And when you really step back and think of it, it's like eight times is a lot, but when you think of all the little things that those top talent, that superstar brings every day, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Oh, I mean, rock stars are the ones who are going to change. I mean, the reason why your organization is going to be successful 2 to 5 years is those rock stars.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as the leader, it's a pretty small organization for us, but it's your job to make sure that those folks are there to change your future because, it's when I look at all the changes, I've worked for some great CEOs, but it wasn't those great CEOs who came up with the next iteration that made that organization really exciting for decades. It was some young rock star who,
Yeah.
was brave enough to try and change it and wasn't so steeped in the way things are done that they were
Right.
innovative. And
Right.
if you lose those people, you lose your future.
I want to kind of go back. I think every leader that I've ever talked to has had some form of aha moment that shaped their leadership. Can you think of like an event or an activity or something, some pivotal moment in your career that shaped who you became as a leader?
Yeah. So, a lot of people don't know this. GameStop went through a bankruptcy in 1996, and it was such a successful company in so many ways that people are like, wait, what? I mean, and I get it because it was this unending good news, but there was a few years there where things went bad and they went really bad. And the bankruptcy taught me a ton. What it taught me was when things go really bad, you're not pushing people, you're not demanding, you're just there to say thank you for showing up today. This is so hard. This emotionally, this is tough. I get it. Thank you. You're awesome. That's all you do all day long. And what I realized is when we came out of the bankruptcy, which we very successfully did, I realized the time to push is good times. Is when things are going well. That's when you make changes that are necessary for the organization. Look, you're always, in good times, you're going to want to be friendly and nice and polite and respectful. Everything that HR always tells us. But at the end of the day, you got to push a little bit. And if you realize you can't push in bad times, that means when things are going really well, you're like, man, I'm not just because things are going great right now. I'm not going to sit on this because I know this needs to change, and I know if we get a downturn in the economy, stuff that we have nothing to do with, I won't be able to push. Right now, I can push. So
Yeah.
when I can push, I push. And that was a big learning for me. And it was through going through, if people have been through a bankruptcy, those are so difficult. It was that really kind of changed me as a leader. I got more empathetic to people, certainly, but also in a strange way got a little bit harder on people too.
You push in the good times. That's a great, piece of the puzzle. I think a lot of leaders feel the need to push in the tough times when everyone's really trying the hardest.
Yeah, no, quite. And look, it also defines what you are as a leader. And when you've laid off as many people as I've laid off because of that bankruptcy, and you see that moment where I mean, to me, when they realize they've got to go home and tell their spouse that all the plans that they've made are on hold because you just laid them off, you get real serious about what is my job as the leader here. My job is to secure these jobs, and that's what I'm here to do. And I think that's why I really like the nonprofit world, because that philosophy works in the nonprofit world. I mean, you can go to a board that's full of private industry, captains of industry. I mean, real diehard capitalists, hard charging, and you can say, look, in our environment, my number one job is to make sure that we don't ever lay anyone off here. And they'll
Right.
accept it in the nonprofit context, where they won't accept that. Frankly, in their own organizations, they don't accept that. But we do that here.
Yeah.
And I'm deadly serious about that. So I'm going to make some tough decisions, and I'm going to push people under the banner of, because I'm done laying people off. I don't ever want to do that again. And so if that means we're going to have some of the weeks that we should be just celebrating and things going great, we're gonna do some hard things as well,
Yeah.
because we're not laying anyone off ever.
Yeah. No, that's a great leadership philosophy. One last question in this segment, then we'll move on to the lightning round. Is you've clearly shown that you've been able to be successful in both corporate and nonprofit, and you made that transition really well. If you were to think about just one important leadership characteristic that allowed you to be successful in both worlds, what would that one characteristic be?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understanding what's important, I think, helps a ton, and it's different than being strategic, right? I mean, strategic is having a plan, right? And
Yeah.
and knowing what's important is a little more tactical in nature, in the sense that when you're growing like GameStop grew, or frankly, the DEC Network is growing. I mean, we're it's immense growth. Is that in these split seconds, you got to figure out that's really not material to us. That is absolutely critical, and focus on what's not critical. And that is, there's a lot of kind of pattern recognition and instinct that goes into that. But man, that's an important skill. It is so easy, particularly in growth mode, to get distracted. And someone walks in your office and they're very passionate and they're very smart, and they tell you this is really critical, and you got to have some real discipline around this.
Mm.
You got to say, we are not going to get distracted by that. And the growth environment in organizations throws that at you every single day, and you've got to you sleep, and you don't get to sleep on it. You sleep on it one night, and that's all you get. And then you got to say, that's not important. We're not going to waste this valuable energy of our people on that. And those are tough, but that I think is something that is absolutely true of both my experience in nonprofit and for profit. Just that ability to go, we're not going to spend energy on that. That's not why we're here.
All right, let's move into the lightning round. Let's have a little bit of fun. I'm going to give you a question and just kind of a short answer here. You said that you weren't really athletically inclined, and I almost interrupted you because I know that you've played soccer your whole life, and you're also a boxer, which I think you're the only boxer I've ever formally met. So how many people have you knocked out?
Oh, a few. Yeah, I've been knocked out a few times too. So yeah, that's part of the deal. You get knocked out.
Okay, that's great. So I love superheroes. If you could have one superpower, that you could pick one superpower, what would it be?
Wow, I think like the Flash. I'd like to be fast. I've never been fast. I mean, I would love that.
All right, he's a good one. I know you've traveled around the world. You just came back from a cruise in the Mediterranean. What's the best meal you've ever had in your life, and where?
Yeah, so I think the best meal that this is crazy, and I know I'm such a sycophant, right? I love buffets, right? And
Okay.
so I was on the cruise ship, not this cruise ship, different cruise ship, and they had the most elegant buffet I've ever. I mean, it was so nice and it was black tie, but I wanted to pull my chair up to the buffet. The food was amazing, best meal I ever had.
So, what's the most exciting place that you've traveled to and visited and spent a little bit of time in? Where
Yeah,
would you go back
Cyprus.
to?
I mean,
Cyprus.
beautiful. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, and not something you hear a lot about, but beautiful beaches, beautiful people, terrifically interesting history. That was a great place to visit.
And what would you say your number one unique attribute that you bring to a team is?
I think what I bring to the team is a focus, is a little bit of a discipline around. Hey, guys, we all agreed. I remember we were in that meeting. It was a year ago. But we all agreed this is what's critical. We're not letting that go, right? I think that's one thing that I think I've been good at.
Now, what do you think others would say your unique puzzle piece is, your unique attribute is?
They'd be like, that guy's always negatives about. I said that a year ago. He's making me stick to that. That's probably the way they'd say it.
All right, great. Awesome. Just two more questions. I really like to give our listeners a chance to hear about something that is important to our guest. And you're the CEO of a nonprofit. I thought it would be great for you to share a little bit more about the DEC Network. And I know you've got a couple of really great initiatives going on in Southern Dallas and Fort Worth. Can you share a little bit about them?
Well, thanks for that opportunity. The DEC Network supports entrepreneurs throughout the DFW area. We're doing it for 10 years. So 10-year anniversary. We've just opened a new location in the southern near south side of Fort Worth. We're expanding our location in the southern sector of Dallas from 7,000 to 20,000 square foot. We support all entrepreneurs all over the city. There's no better place in DFW to start a business. But we do have a particular passion around entrepreneurs of color and women entrepreneurs. And there's been a lot of inequities, particularly in the startup world and the way cash is distributed and investment is done in the startup world. So we spend a lot of time trying to even that playing field. And just a fundamental belief we have is talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And then that's a stolen quote, of course, but something we think about every day.
Yeah. The DEC network does some amazing things, and it's you have the co-working locations, but you also have cohorts that help entrepreneurs learn how to be better, and you also have events around DFW. I think the DEC network has become one of the premier components of the DFW startup ecosystem.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for that plug, Jeff. I mean, we haven't. I mean, I was at our center in Redbird today, and I ran into a guy, and he goes, "You going to the event tonight?" I'm like, "Man, I'm so embarrassed to admit this. I don't know what event you're talking about." And he goes, "It's your event. How do you not know?" I'm like, "Man, we do so many events these days." And so he said, "Well, I'm going, and you're not going." I'm like, "I have a very important interview that I have to do."
Well, we certainly appreciate that. Look, anybody who's interested in learning more about the DEC network, go to www.thedec.co. There's some amazing things. If you're a startup, and are looking for a co-working location, Create Fort Worth or Redbird down in southern sector of Dallas are great location. What advice would you give our listeners on implementing a leadership strategy so that they can grow their own leadership capabilities, whether it's leading a team of 5 or 500?
Yeah, like I mean, advice. When I was at GameStop and I was hiring seasonal employees who worked 4 weeks, just during holiday season, right, December. And I used to interview, and I do 45-minute interviews. I do reference checks, and a veteran manager came to me and said, "You're nuts. I mean, look at the return. These guys are working 15 hours. You're spending 15 hours to pick one. That's crazy." And of course I thought, "Well, Bill, you're an idiot. You're not very good at this." But then I talked to my district manager, who I really admired, and she said, "Bill, you're going to do more than be a store manager. You're practicing your leadership. You're practicing, and so go practice. Go practice when it's not life or death. when you're not hiring employees you hope will be there in 15 years. So you're doing the exact right thing. You keep at it. And yeah, next year, probably don't spend as much time on it. But this, when you're, everyone thinks, look, my scope of responsibility is not that large yet. So leadership doesn't play that of an important role. And that's the time to learn your leadership style. And it's going to be a little bit of the people you admire, but it's got to be yours. You can't just envelop someone's leadership style and take it over. It doesn't work. You just won't be as passionate about it as they are. So practice early when you're fresh out of college. That's the time to figure out who you're going to be as a leader, and whatever mistakes you make, you're going to get over pretty quickly in that environment.
Oh, that's amazing advice. Well, Bill, this has just been so much fun and fantastic. Thank you for sharing your journey and spending a little bit of time with us.
Well, Jeff, thank you for all you do for a lot of nonprofits, but I'm going to thank you particularly for my nonprofit, the DEC Network. So really appreciate it.
What a great interview with Bill Chinn. We learned today that an important piece of the leadership puzzle is authenticity. I really appreciate how Bill stayed true to who he was when he was faced with the situation that would have gone against his leadership character. I want to thank you again for tuning in today. You can find our podcast in all of the streaming platforms as well as all of the social platforms, and just look at the banner down below for where to find us. It would also help us greatly if you would be sure to subscribe, like, and review our podcast so that we can get our audience as broadly as possible. And for the month of December, we're going to drop a new episode every Monday, and then we'll move to every other week come January. Now, catch a sneak peek of next week's episode where we meet Mike Schaefer, the founder and CEO of Echo Factory, a Los Angeles-based advertising agency.
And so delegating and being able to listen and say, I know this is, you have to have this unwavering belief in yourself and the product you're developing. And so hearing somebody say, I think for these reasons, it may not be a good fit for this market, or the timing is not right, or whatever the case is, being able to have an honest look at that and say, hey, am I going to waste the next year or two of my life and my team's life on something that may not actually work? Right. Or am I going to spend the next year or two with our team working on something that has a high likelihood of success?
All right, we'll see you next time.